Hey everybody, thanks for joining. Sorry for the delay. I'm gonna just do I'm gonna go quick, but I'm gonna try to speak articulately too, so because it's for posterity, and also you should be able to hear and understand. What I would recommend doing is like writing down any questions you have, and then we'll take them at the end, because I think what we're gonna do is um, either have to do a follow-up on this, or what I can do is just like take all your questions and then make a recording as a follow-up, if that works. I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Thank you. Okay, as you can see, I made a PowerPoint because Corey, my wife, told me that not everyone is an auditory learner. So this will be really visually tantalizing, I'm sure, you visual learners. So declarations, interviewing, and writing, here we go. Some fundamentals. So like a declaration by definition is the client's official unsworn statement. If it's a sworn statement, we call it an affidavit. That's somewhat trivial. Anyway, we're focused on the client's experiences, perspectives, and words. And then the declaration writer writes in the first person point of view. And I think that's the one and only way to take notes too whenever you're talking to a client. Don't try to do third person and later sort of like have to go through all these steps to translate it. Just write it down. You are sort of inhabiting the voice of the speaker, right? And you're writing as though you were that voice. So it's a science and an art, right? We can prepare for it, and I know you're already getting into this process and figuring this out. And really, that's a big takeaway from this whole thing is like you just learn by experience, right? But you can go into your interviews really prepared, and the more preparation you do, the better. So every case is the types of cases have their own requirements or elements, and we need to know those, right? So the questionnaires are going to really be our best guides, right? But as you go along and work with those, just make sure that you're getting with Jenny, or I guess just on your own, sort of modifying them and thinking about how can we make things better all the time. And then like as far as preparation, to research the client before the interview, look all through their file. So Lorena's consultation notes on my case, under the notes tab, or if not there, under the time entries tab, and then looking at any client documents we have in Dropbox. And then also too, taking time to chat somebody or have a call with somebody just to get yourself more familiar with who is the client, especially if there's a lot of information that you're not making sense of. So really that investment before you interview just makes the interview so much easier and more productive. The art side of the interview, or the art side of the declaration process, is interviewing and writing. I mean, it's all an artistic process in a way. So language is not a science, and your role as an interpreter of the client is not a scientific act. It's an artistic act. And the reason I say that is because I don't want to give anyone the impression that there's like right and wrong way to go about it. I don't want you to be focused on the wrong things. The types of cases we're most commonly doing are VAWAs, U visas, I-601A provisional waivers, and then you might end up doing declarations for other types of cases, even though they're not required. We end up submitting them. So I know that we do declarations sometimes, all the time, for I-589s or asylum cases, and there may be other writing assignments you end up getting too. But the stuff we're going to talk about here is generally applicable. So your objective as the interviewer is to invite, allow, or push the client to definitely address all the case requirements. Like you have to get that stuff. And if you don't, then you have to go back to the client for it. but then it's also like really important to allow the client to speak about themselves and say enough about themselves to where they really humanize themselves and tell a story. So this is all declaration writing is all about storytelling, and it's a pretty exciting thing. Um, this is uh, prepare for the interview. So again, I kind of touched on all these things. Interviewing the client, we discussed this briefly the other morning, but set it up, right? Text the client first, let them know how much time you need, well, introduce yourself and always, say, I'll say, I'm Elijah, assistant to the attorney Lorena Rivas. So anytime you contact the client, make sure that you drop Lorena's name because they have hired Lorena and they've sought Lorena out and they want to know that she is overseeing everything that happens with their case. So that's very important. And then let them know that they're going to need a private place and a private time to talk to you. And so however you want to communicate that by text is awesome. And then set up that time, schedule it on the calendar, on the My Case calendar. And remember, what I often fail to do, and Lorena is very particular about, is putting your initials as the first thing on that calendar entry. So Lorena knows who is doing what at what time. You're going to call the client, you're going to introduce yourself again. And really this is important to take time to do this and to do it with care, because really you want to win people's trust and you want to put people at ease, because the more confident they feel about you handling their case and being trusted with their story, that the more they're going to say to you. And really you want them to just be super open with you as much as possible. So again, introduce yourself. Hi, and then your name, and I'm helping Lorena with your declaration, right? The purpose, it's important to describe to them the purpose, and this is especially complex, or you have to be especially careful with VAWA, right? Because as we've discussed, like the background of the client could be really bad. It could be like a really bad, vicious, violent life that they've had, and that could be the basis of their case. But then it could be less so, right? It could be like we're portraying their own child as an abuser, and maybe their kid has been like, an asshole, and maybe their kid has mistreated them. But really what we're doing is our job is to depict that person in the worst light possible. And so especially in the cases where things aren't super bad, you might have to take some time to reassure the client that nothing bad is going to happen to their loved one as a result of this process. I mean, that's a question you get with so many VAWA cases, like, is this going to harm my loved one? And the answer is no, right? VAWA is a confidential process. Laws protect the confidentiality of the client, certainly here in our office and the work we do. And then we send this information to an adjudicator who works for the government. The laws also prevent them from sharing it. So it's protected, the whole process and people involved are kept confidential. So you might have to do some work there to reassure the client. As far as the purpose as well, like, you want to describe to them what is the declaration, right? The declaration is their official statement that is going to help them prove their case, right? And you have to set up the client's expectations. Like, I'm going to ask you several different questions about a variety of topics, but we're going to talk about uncomfortable topics here inevitably. And I'm going to ask you to tell me about bad stuff that has happened to you, or I'm going to ask you to talk to me about, like, all the worst stuff you can think of that this person has done, like in the case of VAWAs, right? It's tricky. What I always say to clients is, like, we got to, we'll be honest. We're always going to be honest with the government, because the last thing we would want to do is lie, because lying would be the worst possible thing we could do for your case. However, our job is to creatively represent the facts of your story, right? And so it's not like we're going to say every nice thing that your family member has ever done in VAWA cases, right? We're really going to focus on the bad stuff, because that's the topic and that's our task, right? So it's important to let them know that they have to be totally honest and open with us. They have to correct us if we're misunderstanding, but that also we're not, in the case of vows in particular, we're not being really fair to people, right? But that's the task and that's the objective, right? And that's really the price that they have to pay. One of the prices they have to pay to hopefully win an immigration benefit. I think if you take all that time to really introduce yourself and the concept of the case and give the client a chance to ask questions or express their doubts from the beginning, you'll help to win their trust. And that's you want to start off on that foot. Okay, I just said a lot, but really you just need to get the client to talk to you, okay? Don't overcomplicate it. It's not all like there's one right way to do it. You know what I mean? You just need to like put the client at ease, let them know what your objective is, and then hopefully they're going to talk to you. So let the conversation happen organically. You have your questioner there to remind you of all the stuff you need to talk about, but don't be like married to that questionnaire, because really what it can do is sort of like it can interrupt actually the natural flow of the conversation. So like I said, it's a work in progress and it's trial and error. So your objective, this is a echo of what I said. You gotta get the client to talk about the case requirements, also known as the elements, right? You want to humanize the client and you want to help them or allow them to tell their stories. Breaking the ice is important. So we get into some grim subject matter during these declaration interviews, but really it's good to start talking, let the client sort of be relaxed and talk about themselves. So ask them something along the lines of these questions, right? Like who they are, who do they love, what do they care about, right? It may seem like, well, that's not so directly related to, you know, proving that this person has suffered abuse. But when you're writing a declaration, the more context you have, the better. The more information you have to work with and sort of present a sympathetic story of this person's life. Remember to transition throughout the conversation. So now I'm going to ask you about X, right? Now I'm going to ask you about problems that you've had with your husband. Now I'm going to ask you about that night that you were attacked, right? So you don't want to be too abrupt with your transitions. You want to guide the client through the interview and give them some warning about what's coming next. Let's see. So this is kind of what I was saying. The client's life is context for their story. Find out about them. Take time to do that. It's not just focused on the crime or the thing that they've suffered. Really, all the details can become relevant if we think about them properly and position them properly in the declaration. Note-taking is definitely an art. I know some people like, I've seen interpreters work and they take amazing notes, and I'm not really sure how they do it. I don't really have those skills, but what I do know is that you need to capture all the important facts and details, and you also need to find some way to record the client's voice for your own reference for when you write the declaration. So, and what I say by voice is like word choice of expression, but also like the cadence of their voice, right? Like the sound or rhythm of it. Do they speak in long sentences? Do they speak in short sentences? Do they use words with long syllables or just short syllable words or whatever? So that type of a thing. So, okay. So when you close the call, it's important to thank the client very much, right? For opening up to you and taking their time to do this. This is a really important part of their case, and you definitely asked something of them. And so thank you for trusting me with this information. Then give the client an idea of what's going to come next with the declaration process, that you'll write up all your notes, right? And that you will consult with Lorena, and that you will be back with them regarding any follow-up questions she has about their story. Okay, writing the declaration, everybody's got a unique process, but some things that everyone should do are clean up your notes and save a document to the notes folder in Dropbox. And then start a new document to actually write your declaration draft, right? However that works easiest for you. But the idea is to save your notes and don't go editing over them, because you want to have that original sort of raw material. Organize your notes into numbered paragraphs. That's going to help you be able to identify like what happens at what point in the document, and also too for the person reading it. So if you have to discuss it with Jenny, discuss it with Lorena, or if when the adjudicator, if there's ever if it ever becomes the subject of debate or dispute after it's filed, then it's just easier for everybody to reference in this paragraph, blah, blah, blah. Place the most powerful or revealing sentences prominently. So that means you can do subheadings. You don't have to do subheadings. There's no rule that says you have to format this in any super specific way, okay? We like to try to be uniform and consistent. That's what we're working towards. This is a theme in the office in all of our procedures. But subheadings are great when they're bolded, right? Because it's like in magazines where they like pull like a really good part of a quote and they blow it up to the side on the page, right? And so one idea you can do with that is like, if the client is giving you lots of good quotes and you strategically position those subheadings throughout, really it's like you can read just the subheadings and then get an idea of the client's entire story. That would be an ideal. Don't hurt yourself trying to make all that happen, especially not at first. You can take liberties with, and then also too, this idea of placing the powerful stuff in a prominent place. Topic sentences, right, are really important. And so sometimes, and I think I touch on this later in more depth, so I'll come back to that. You can also rearrange what they said. It doesn't have to be, exactly as they told it to you in that order. You can take the liberties. That's your sort of like creative power there to move things around and see how they're situated most impactfully. And then you'll translate the draft and share with Jenny. Okay, completing the process. As you can see, a bunch of bullet points. I'll speed it up here a little bit, but we should stick to this process, and I think you all are aware of it, but in case you're not, you need to discuss any necessary follow-up with Jenny, right? So you two look at the draft and say, what else do we need to know from the client? If you want to at that point, if you have big questions that you two can't resolve, then you need to go to Lorena and try to steal a little bit of her time for her to look at it. Which might be a good idea anyways, but she's a busy person, so I don't know if that's gonna work systemically. But anyways, do a follow-up interview with the client as needed. Revise the declaration using your new notes, pass it to Lorena for any comments, and then follow up with the client again if needed.
I was gonna say on that, and
Yeah.
just to do that, I'm available now and I will squeeze you in as much as possible. Most of the time, even if it's in the evenings, I can meet with you and discuss things. So yeah, obviously I'm here at the office more from 10 to 5. I'm usually pretty crammed for meeting with clients. However, I do have my noon hour. If my noon hour is available, I can always have a working lunch where I talk to you about a thing. In that case, I don't usually get to the office until 10 a.m. because I take my time getting ready in the morning, and I'm doing stuff, but I'm doing background stuff. I'm usually checking emails and doing things. So probably not anything before 10 a.m. With that being said though, in the evenings, you can schedule me in the evenings as well. And I can have a working dinner, or I usually go to bed around 10 o'clock, or I say 10 o'clock, go to bed. That's when I'm just not functional. I go to bed around midnight, but I'm not really that functional after 10 o'clock. But yeah, I can find a time, put it on my calendar. If you put it on my calendar, I will schedule it. And if for whatever reason it doesn't work for me, I'll just move it and tell you we need to reschedule it. So, and I would hope that it might be as simple as a 15-minute phone call that we can resolve it. And that put that time. And if you need longer, half hour, whatever.
Yeah, awesome. That's great. And that's not really how we've done it up until now, but I think it might save time if you check in with Lorena and even share the document and give her a chance just to raise any questions, which I know, Lorena, you can do very quickly about follow-up with the client. And that would prevent you having to make potentially a second follow-up call with the client, although there's nothing wrong with doing that. As long as you let them know from the beginning of the process that, hey, we're gonna have this call, and I'm gonna call you back as many times as I need to until Lorena is convinced that this declaration is as powerful as it can be in terms of evidence for your application. After Lorena's comments and any final follow-up with the client, you'll finalize the declaration. It'll come to review. This is, a review of the declaration will be done with the client, and that's the review specialist job. So that's not something you have to worry about. But that's a separate quality check on it to make sure that it's complete and correct, right? And so the clients who have a high level of literacy, or for whatever reason prefer, they ask for us to send it, and they read it by themselves and give us feedback if needed. A lot of other people like to actually sit down, or in your all's case, have a call and just read through it. So it requires sharing the document and then reviewing it with them, or letting them do it on their own. Make any corrections needed following the client's comments on the declaration, and then obviously pass it to the proper person for pre-filing review. Go back to Lorena again. So writing style, just to reiterate, the most important is to preserve the client's voice. Do not overwrite it. The declaration, in essence, is the written transcript of the client's statement. That's one sort of simple way to think about it. I'm just trying to remind you that I'm saying a lot of words here, but what we're doing is relatively simple stuff, but it does require some skill. Okay, so strategies and pointers. Open-ended versus closed-ended questions. This is an important thing to think about, and maybe you already do. Use open-ended questions first, and as long as the client goes into the proper amount of detail. So for example, can you tell me about some of the problems you've had with your husband? It's an open-ended question. It can't be answered with a yes or no. It gives the client a space to discuss freely what they want to say, right? However, use closed-ended questions to lead clients to speak about what they may be avoiding, right? Has your husband ever punched you? The answer to that question is yes or no. If the client answers yes to a closed-ended question, you have to ask follow-up questions, more questions, more questions. There's a danger in starting out with closed-ended questions, and there's also a bit of a danger in using closed-ended questions at all. And that's because they're leading the client to agree with you potentially about something that may not be true. And so anytime I ask a closed-ended question, I will say something to the effect of, whenever he talked to you that way, did it make you feel ashamed, or was it something different? So I'll always give the client an out, right? I don't want to like push the client and make them feel like they have to say yes to me, because then the whole thing is sort of corrupted or compromised potentially. They need to feel like they have the power not to get a right or wrong answer, but to tell me honestly how they feel. But closed-ended questions become an important tool, especially with clients who are not going to just freely give you the gritty details of their experiences. Okay, so similarly, right, or thematically, then it's like challenge the client to tell their story. You'll come across people who are resistant, right? Because they're talking about trauma, they're talking about trauma inflicted on them by family members a lot of the time, and it just like doesn't feel good, and it feels wrong, right? So this is a time to sort of pause and remind the client that, like, you understand. Or let me correct myself. Not that you understand, but I think you have to be very tactful about how you state this. But like, if I were you, I would be uncomfortable too. But honesty is your best shot, right? The more honest you are with me now, the better your chances of winning your case, right? But I think taking that time to pause, if you sense them being resistant or avoidant, that stuff is very important to do. And I think those pauses and those sort of empathic statements, they go a long way. Summary versus theme. I know this is a lot of information. This is being recorded and we can do follow-up. But look, as far as a technique, summary versus theme. So summary describes in general terms what happened repeatedly or habitually, right? So for example, my son always calls me names. my husband would come home drunk and force me to have sex with him, right? Those are summaries. Those are describing what happened repeatedly, right? And we need that stuff. We need those summaries because they depict what happened over a period of time, patternistically, right? We also need scenes, right? Because scenes dramatize the declaration. Scenes draw the reader into the experience, and also they raise the credibility of the whole statement, right? Because I don't know what is the thinking. I think it's because it's easier to sort of make up or lie about generalities. But if you're going to be like very specific, that's more, you're more committed to the story at that point, right? So it's more credible in the eyes of the adjudicator. So scenes show isolated experiences in detail. So for example, once at a family gathering in the kitchen in front of everyone, my son called me a puta, right? Or whatever, like we get all, you can just imagine any terrible thing that's happened to people. Scene versus summary, it's an important concept. Place events in time and space, so always be asking who, what, when, where, why, and how. Slow down, circle back until you have a clear picture of a situation. So timelines and context are important. If something doesn't make sense to you, you got to slow down and have the client explain it to you until the picture becomes clear, because if it's confusing to you, it's also probably going to be confusing to the adjudicator, and it will just give them an excuse or a reason to deny the application or to say, we don't believe this or whatever, right? This was a mess. Descriptions of emotional and mental experiences. We've already talked about this some, but these are really key. So the fewer, I wrote this and I'll explain it. So the fewer objective facts in a case there are, the more we have to rely on the client's thoughts, feelings, and reflections to show that they meet the case requirements. So for example, if there has been no outright physical abuse, no objective abuse, right? If there's been like, I guess like name calling is also objective facts or objective abuse, but like the farther we get away from physical violence, the less physical violence there is, the more reflections we need on the mental pain, right? Or the emotional pain. So I think you all get that concept. I'm not gonna belabor it. Okay, so I was beginning to address this earlier. Writer as the interpreter of the client's experience. So we have to keep in mind always that it's the client's story in the client's voice. However, you have creative control over what to highlight from the declaration, right? Because sometimes declarations practically write themselves. Sometimes the facts of a case are so strong and the client's ability to talk about their experiences is so good, you don't really have to do anything. You just clean up your notes, you slap on a title, and it's like a powerful statement, right? Other times, you're going to get less compelling facts, or you're going to get a client who doesn't talk so well or so willingly about things, right? So in those cases where the declarations are less naturally compelling, then your role as an interpreter really comes out. So some tools that you can use and actually have to use to highlight the important stuff in the declaration are like, one, succinct sentences that capture what the client meant but did not exactly say. So topic sentences, right? We're running out of time already. Look at that. Okay. So if you understand the client's meaning, then you can write a sentence they never told you, because you're not adding anything. You're staying true to what the client said to you and what the client meant, even though they didn't say it in this really nicely packaged way. And then you take that sentence and you place it at the beginning of a paragraph, right? So if a fussy adjudicator is reading it, when they read the first sentence of a paragraph, they know what is the main idea of that paragraph. So another tool to highlight the meaning of the declaration is the arrangement of stuff, right? So the arrangement of different parts of the story. And it may not be that chronological order is always the best. We want things to be clear. We don't want things to be a sort of mess where you can't tell what is happening when. On the other hand, sometimes you want to create intentionally a harsh transition, right? So I cooked up an example here. This would be a hypothetical VAWA example. The end of one paragraph and the beginning of the next. So when our daughter was born, I was so full of joy and hope for our future. New paragraph. After our baby's first birthday, I found out my husband was cheating on me. So there's this sort of like, there's a shock or a jolt, and you created that, at least in this hypothetical, that was created whenever you took notes that were separate from each other in the client statement and you paired them together. So the pairing together of sort of a happy moment and a sad moment, for example, can create the type of shock that you need and the type of subtle or unspoken communication that this person suffered, right? That this person has experienced harm, right? So that's the idea. That's what I was just saying. And then here's my little inspirational last slide, and we still have 7 minutes left. The act of making a declaration can be empowering and emotional for the client. So approach the task with humility and pride. And I know that sounds grandiose, but I really do think it's an important job. It's a very cool job, right? People get paid a lot of money to talk to invite people to open up about their problems, right? And so it's a big responsibility. It's a cool responsibility. So yeah, let's go ahead and I'm gonna stop talking now. Oh, let me say really quickly that I have been saving a few at a time. I have been saving sample declarations to the Dropbox folder number 7 called trainings. That's not right. Yeah, here it is, 7 trainings. And if we go down to templates, I know it's buried, but templates there, sample declarations. So I have that many in there so far. There's like so many other good ones for reference, but you can see how I've been saving them. So it'll tell you what type of case and then what type of sort of crime or trouble there was in the background. So there's that. There's many resources to look up for declaration writing. And if you feel like, I'd like to know more, just Google around. You can get some great ones from like ILRC. Many different places will have good declaration guidance. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking. We have 6 minutes. Would you all like to ask me any questions, or Elissa or Lorena, would you like to add anything?
No, it sounded all good on my end. So just, of course, I would just emphasize, and it probably was emphasized here, you're in charge, you are the voice of the client. You are tasked with that. That's a big, heavy burden, but nonetheless, remember, if you were that client, how would you want to make sure and relay what has happened to them or why they are deserving of getting their status in their documents? So, and then also remember, when you're writing these things and you're presenting this, approach it from somebody who doesn't have any type of information of the client. So don't let any holes or gaps be shown there. And I will, that's where I'm kind of like, sometimes when I put messages on there or edits needed, it's because it comes from left field or it just doesn't flow like a nice story. And with that also being said, remember who's going to be reviewing this too, a person who reviews a lot of things. So who looks at these every day, who is really not shocked by the stuff they see anymore because they see so much of it. So don't make it, change that. Try to make the paper, the story jump out from the pages, make it jump out. So use colorful language, use descriptive language, very good. It's always about, can you picture these things happening to these people? And if you can't picture it, then you're not doing a good job. You need to put more descriptions in it. What type of room was it? What was the person looking at? How were they dressed up? I mean, you can do a number of things to provide it and make the story more alive and more effective.
Awesome. What else?
I think that my main question is about the time we're going to spend doing this, because I have, for example, I started doing my callings yesterday, and I interviewed 2 people in between yesterday and today, and I'm really scared about how many times do I have to do all the declaration, because I mean, I have one yesterday and I have one too. I know that everything is going to be in progress, and meanwhile I'm learning, but I would like to know especially and exactly what do you expect about the specific time?
To me, it could take about 4 hours. Right? I don't know. The meeting with the clients and then drafting it, it takes a lot longer than you think. It really does, writing it. So if Rosana, if anytime you feel like you're falling behind because you cannot keep track of the declarations, and this goes for anybody, you have to let Jenny know, and Jenny, you need to tell me, because that means we need another staff member. Okay. I don't want you to shortcut the declaration or make it sloppy because you don't have enough time or you have too many. But I would say be expecting at least spend 4 hours per declaration, and it'll probably take you longer at the beginning, but it's not going to be something that's done very quickly.
Yeah, Lorena, yes, you are saying 4 hours, but maybe in our case that we are learning right now, like how much you...
If you could get one, if you could get one, and maybe that includes the asking the questions, the declaration questionnaire, and then writing it. If you get that, if only get one done per day, and then I don't think that's unreasonable. So, yeah.
So we're running out of time, and I know that there's more to discuss. There's more to say, and there's more to ask about this. So I'm just going to put it to you all. It's 4:36 right now. Should we log off and get back on and just get this sort of hash out any issues that you have now, as opposed to postponing it, or what would you all like to do?
I think if there's more questions and stuff, that it would be best to just start right now and continue on. And if somebody has to leave, that's fine.
Yeah. Well, we can always reset it, or yeah.
Okay, so I guess what I'm going to do here, we have less than a minute, so let's log off. We can jump back on. If you can't stay forever, that's great. I'm going to continue to record in case we talk about really relevant stuff for future reference. Sound good?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.